So I don't think, I don't think this will be a 6 o'clock night like it's been other nights, because this is just me and just talking about some NEASC stuff. And I think Charlie, you wanted to talk about some tuition stuff. So, but we can jump right in and go through the NEASC stuff if everyone's ready.
Yep.
Sure.
So this year, this past year, we had done our NEASC work, and it was the preliminary piece. And the first part of the new NEASC process is basically a formative assessment of where we're at. So the report that we have here that is part of tonight's presentation and will be made public after tonight as well, is really like our formative check-in. And I'll go through some of the key pieces of that, but the long story short is that the visitors agreed 100% with the staff assessment in the school in terms of where we were at and the things to focus on. So that was really positive. There was nothing in their visit that they said was dramatically different on the downside. There were a couple of things that they said we kind of were too harsh about, but they said, great, put it in your plan. So it was overall a really good process and supportive of us kind of moving forward. So on this first piece, the foundational elements are on page 12 of the report in front of you. There's 6 pieces that schools have to have in place after their decennial visit to remain accredited. We meet 3 of the 6, and they can sort of turn and see what they are on each subsequent page. 1.1A was about the safety, the culture of safety in the school, the physical plant safety, things like that. We stated that we met that one. They agreed. They said that they saw lots of processes, protocols, procedures, practices, all the pieces were there that the school, both by the reports of parents, students, and teachers, but also what they observed were in place. So that one was a meets. 1.2A is focused around the vision of the graduate. It's part of the learning culture piece, and it requires that each school have a vision of the graduate that contains core values, beliefs, things like that, as well as exit outcomes to support where we're going with learners. We stated that we have the components of that in our strategic design, but it has not been formalized at the school level into a plan, and they agreed. They were impressed with the strategic design work the district went through, but concurred with us that we don't yet have a usable school level document where teachers and parents and learners can take that and know where we're going and the purpose of lessons and things like that. So that's something we said we were going to have to work on, and they agreed. We currently do not meet that standard. 2.2A was curriculum documentation. NEASC's accreditation standards require a consistent written template in every course and every grade level in the accredited school, which we do have, but the components that they want to see in the document, we did not have at this stage. So every one of these curriculum documents has to have reference to the vision of the graduate, which we don't currently have finished. So that was one piece that we were missing. And then they also wanted to see like sample assessment items, what assessment rubrics would be attached with those items. So they want it to be sort of more concrete in that way, almost like a grab and go. So any parent, any student, any teacher can grab the curriculum document for that course and go through and know exactly what the flow of the lessons will look like. A lot of that work has been done. Heather Schulman went through and she revised the template to add the things that NEASC suggested. So that's a does not meet at the moment, but a pretty easy, I say easy, it'll take time, but it's not a complicated sort of fix.
Because you do have like the class syllabus that comes up,
Correct.
but you're just missing components within that.
Correct, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. The 3.1A professional practices requires schools to have a written school improvement and growth plan that is supported by the vision of the graduate and specifically outlines the, yearly what the school will do to continue a continuous cycle of improvement. We have that in process, but it was not completed at the time they were here. And we also don't have a vision of the graduate completed yet. So again, that was not a surprise. We stated that's not in place. They concurred. So that's something we'll have to work on over the next school year.
Oh, you said at the time that they were here, it's just not complete still.
Correct.
It's not that it wasn't.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And those 3 are some combination of them. Every visit that I've been on, that other members of staff have been on, some combination of those 3 at the collaborative conference, sometimes all 3 of them like we have, are the ones that are missing. That's pretty common because these standards are relatively new. So, and a lot of schools are in constant revision mode on curriculum documents and things like that. So there was nothing alarming of the fact that we had those 3. It was no surprise to us, and the team that visited agreed as well. 4.1A was the one focused around supports for learners, having a system of supporting learner needs, having ways for learners to access and then have those supports implemented. We have a lot of tools, a lot of processes in place. We stated that we met that one and the team agreed, and they highlight that a little more later in the report. And then 5.1A was about the physical plant, that the buildings are safe, secure, and healthy. And while there's things that they recommend that we also recommended, the baseline of our facility meets the standard of accreditation. So that was another one that we met. So the three listed up here are the ones foundational elements that we have to work on. And again, it's finalizing and formalizing the vision of the graduate, having a consistent written curriculum document that meets the NEASC standard, and then school improvement and growth plan being formalized and in place. As they go through the report, because those are just the foundational pieces, there's a lot more standards than those that are not required per se, but areas that we need to work on, and there's a sliding scale with those. These are the long narrative pieces now that you start to get into. There were some commendations listed at the end of this entire section of the report. So I've you can read through at some other point the whole thing if you'd like, but the commendations that they identified kind of centered around the areas that we've been focusing on for several years as a district and school. The co-curricular activity choice was one they commended us on. Teacher leadership opportunities that exist within the building was something that they commended us on. Our Teaching Tuesdays, which we implemented last year outside the whole NEASC piece, as we've been developing the professional learning community model. We have teachers every 5th or 6th Tuesday offering workshops to each other, and then the rest of the staff signs up. So they fit within the bounds of what we're doing as a school, but it's a teacher sort of leadership and teaching each other opportunity. They said that model was really effective and they commended that. Developing more and more learner pathways. They saw evidence of that within our program of studies that they commended, but also the interactions with learners and teachers and the opportunities that they saw happening in classrooms. During their visit, they saw very high levels of learner engagement all over the building. They said that the learners they spoke to also spoke to the high degree of learner engagement in the classroom and in the school. The survey results confirmed that. So that was another thing they commended. Our technology they thought was really good for a school. The access learners have, it seemed like it was being effectively used. The variety of courses and the partnerships that we have in place, the obvious connections and care that teachers have with learners was another area. The learner support team, our school safety environment, and some of the initiatives that we did last year, like the digital passes, they thought that was a really good school safety element. They really had a lot of positive things about the health services, the library media center. They said that our school has a high degree of collaboration and a culture of collaboration that was evident. They called out some specific smaller, big things, but more focused, like the HVAC project was put in there as a commendation. They said a lot of schools overlook that work, and to see us recognizing the need and doing the work in an older building, they thought as a district that was very good. Our safety protocols, recent projects around the building outside the HVAC work, and then they specifically cited the activities director as a unique position that seems to have a lot of positive impact on the school. And then I just pulled a couple excerpts out that I thought kind of highlighted why they got those commendation areas. They talked about the school culture promoting intellectual risk-taking and personal and professional growth. Teachers throughout the school use a growth mindset in their classrooms. So that was something I thought captured a lot of the work we've been doing in that realm over several years. The school has an inclusive definition of leadership and provides school leaders with the authority and responsibility to improve student learning. The students are inquisitive, and the instruction given by the teachers fostered inquiry and problem-solving skills. The school has initiated a plan to provide learners opportunities to demonstrate their learning through a variety of assessment strategies that inform classroom instruction and curriculum. Educators often engage in ongoing reflection, formal and informal collaboration, and professional development to improve student learning and well-being. So we've focused on those things over the last several years, and that clearly came through to the visitors. And I thought those quotes kind of captured the work that we've been doing really well. They did have a battery of recommendations beyond just the foundational areas. They felt that the cultures of the school, we operate as one school, and they commended that, but they felt like there's still a lot of disconnect, that the language, the vocabulary, how learners look at the one half of the building versus the other was creating a disconnect that was prohibiting some growth and improvement. So they recommended accelerating the work to really transform the two school cultures into one. They recommended looking at the consistency of our procedures for conflict and discipline and the resolution of those things so that they're consistent between the middle school and the high school and from teacher to teacher. They recommended looking at middle level social emotional learning needs based on the data from surveys, what the staff self-reported, some of their learner interviews, and they felt accurately so that that area needed some more focus. They talked about improving learner voice by adding that element to the school board, which is great because we have to do that anyway.
I was gonna say, isn't that a law?
Yeah, that's an easy one for us to fix. They talked about the importance of shared vision and vocabulary specifically around learning. For example, in some classrooms, a teacher might call this type of tool a summative assessment, but over in this classroom, it's different. They might use the language of criteria for success in this room, but in this room, they just call it a rubric. So that was kind of a disconnect that they said was impeding collective work to improve learning. Having common understandings of what the competencies that were being reported looked like and what the reporting process looked like. That's kind of our work on Otis anyways at this point. One piece that they reflected on was that parents, both in the focus group and the survey, reported not always feeling like they were included and specifically in the educational process enough with their learners. So they recommended expanding those efforts to build better partnerships specifically with parents. They cited the cleanliness and overall maintenance of the building and recommended working with facilities to improve some of those elements. The Pratt got a lot of attention. The stage is currently not easily accessible to individuals with mobility needs, so they recommended improving that. And then looking at the usage of the Pratt, which especially when they were here was kind of in a sorry state because of the amount of use it had gotten that winter. And then continuing to reallocate spaces as our needs and focuses shift. So those are the major recommendations that they kind of looked at. And again, I pulled a few excerpts and I shared this exact sort of presentation with the staff as well. They looked at the survey and stated that only 40% of teachers reported setting concrete instructional goals as often as every week. That doesn't mean that they don't have goals, but that culture of looking together at what the competencies for that unit of study will be and how they're going to sort of chunk those wasn't consistent across the board. And our teachers reported that themselves. The use of relevant assessment data is a strength in some areas, though not every team or academic department is doing so consistently. Parents do not feel as though the school values them as partners in their child's education. The use of shared rubrics across courses or disciplines is very limited, and the school lacks a formal process for the collaborative analysis of student work and assessments to direct and inform instruction, as well as highlight potential improvements in their shared curriculum. So those were some of the pieces that, again, informed their recommendations. Obviously, a lot more than that, but these are some of the ones that stood out to me as I went through. So at this point, we spent last year preparing for the collaborative conference report to take place. So that was done in the fall of 2021. The spring of 2022 was our visit. The next stage is happening this current school year, making improvements and adjustments based on that visit. Next fall, the fall of 2023, we then have to write the report for the decennial visit. So it's kind of a quick turnaround. And then in the spring of 2024 is when we have our longer decennial visit, which is the more formal report that will come out at that point.
And so we'll be the same group that comes back and they'll check for all the not nets to be met?
Potentially. They like to keep it with the same group, but it all depends because it's 100% volunteer. So sometimes people, like I was asked to go back to a school that I had done a collaborative conference with this year, but the timing didn't work out with stuff going on here. So they're going to replace me with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So they like to keep the same team, but sometimes it does change up.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll actually look at everything again because a lot of the standards have like sliding scales. And so in many of them, we had stated that we were in the developing area, which is like towards the middle. So they'll reevaluate as we will and see if we've moved up. Are we implementing more things? Have some things backslid? They'll basically do a whole review with us again.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, the goal is to improve the sliding scale ratings where we can focus on those, but also make sure all the foundational elements are now met at that point.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that is a reachable goal for the school to be able to get up to par with all of those?
I do, yeah. I mean, the next slide, talks about the plan that we've started working out a little bit. It's going to be a lift, but the good news is that a lot of the stuff we're doing, and you can click it whenever, Nick. A lot of the stuff that we're doing anyways is going to support the things that they're recommending we do here.
Yeah.
So the curriculum piece is the easiest foundational statement to knock out of the park because a lot of that work has already been done. What
Mhm.
Heather Schulman did was take our existing templates, go back and look at some examples from NEASC, and then added a couple of areas that NEASC said we were missing. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not redoing the work we've already done. We're simply adding the pieces that are missing.
Mhm.
So over the course of the year, during team planning time and things like that, our teacher teams will start adding some of those other elements that those are completely in place by the spring. The other areas need a larger, I guess, focus. So our staff, every like 2 Tuesdays a month, instead of a staff meeting, every teacher will be on a committee to focus on one of these 4 areas, and that's when they'll do the work. So we're going to have a committee that focuses on the vision of the graduate, one that works on writing the school improvement and growth plan, which comes out of NEASC as well as district goals. And we've already, again, done a lot of that work over the last couple of years anyways. So it's taking the template and then updating and finalizing. A committee that's going to look at the combined culture of the school and make recommendations, involve parents, seek out student voice, go to the school board, things like that, on how the cultures of the school can be better united. And then one that's going to look at learner support and improving those specific processes there. So those committees on the next slide will start to meet twice a month during staff meeting time. So teachers won't be asked to do extra things outside of those Tuesday time sessions. Each one has an administrator attached who will do the legwork of pulling the teacher input together, writing out the drafts and sharing with the team and then getting feedback. The administrators are going to take that burden and ask the teachers to do more of the collaboration and collection of information on Tuesdays. So those committees will come up with some drafts of the concrete pieces NEASC has asked us to produce. Starting in January, we'll take 1 Tuesday a month to start sharing out those drafts with staff and getting input from the whole staff on each individual group's report, and then making some adjustments and revisions and continue that sort of cycle of meeting. With the other efforts that we're already doing, also supplementing that. So we already have been focusing for 2 years now on our professional learning community. That will actually address a lot of the recommendations. For example, the common language recommendation, as PLCs develop and use consistent systems and tools, the language that supports that effort will become more consistent. The common rubrics used across grades and disciplines is something PLCs develop to collect formative assessment information. So a lot of the pieces they said there, and the report will be met with our PLC work that we're already doing. We already are working on the student school board representative. We are posting for elections to be next week. So tomorrow the learners are going to have a nomination process and things like that. So that will be in place by the end of the month anyway. Otis and the 1 to 4 grading work will improve the competency elements they talked about, and especially the reporting. And then we had talked last year about the middle high school taking a backseat with MTSSB because we were focusing on NEASC. This year, our counseling director, Kim Baker, is going to be working directly with David Frazier to start working on MTSSB here, which will provide that consistency of approach with learner support, discipline processes, and things like that. And our goal at the end of the year with the products, and again, the staff have already had a sort of a conversation and dialogue about this, would be to produce a vision of the graduate by hopefully the springtime that we can then start using in the second part of the year to make some decisions, put in our school improvement plan. Teachers can start referencing and getting comfortable with the language of that. By the springtime, having the school growth and improvement plan, which will have the vision of the graduate elements in there, bring that to the board, have some feedback there, and have that in place to set the path for the improvement that NEASC is looking for. Hopefully have one school culture, one set of processes, maybe one identity that's more consistent across the building. Having a consistent system for learner support with that MTSSB focus, and then having the grab and go curriculum documents in place. These things have to be set by the fall, but again, a lot of this work we've already been doing. This is just sort of an impetus to do it now and finish it up versus having it hang out any longer. So that's where we're at with NEASC. It sounds like a daunting process in front of us. But I will say that the work that our staff has been doing and the work that is in front of us, it continues to align, and it's not work that's going to feel different for the staff. And I've already, let them know in conversation as we did this with them at staff meeting, that our expectation in terms of time commitment is that we're just giving staff meeting time for this purpose, for the extra sort of NEASC documents. Anything else that we're doing that's important is being done in these other areas that we're already working on.
The committees that you, what is, how many people are on it? Are they volunteers or they've been assigned for specific reasons?
Can you go back to that, Nick? So these are the committees for this part of the work, are teacher committees. So every member of the staff has to be involved in this process, pretty consistently. So it'll be roughly 15 people per committee, maybe a little less than that. And they're ranking which committees they want to be on. If everyone chooses Vision of the Graduate as their first choice, then some people will go to their second choice and so on. So the teacher committees are doing the initial work, doing some research, pulling documents together on those Tuesday times. And then they're also coming up with plans to go out into the community and have parent feedback on, for example, the Vision of the Graduate. That's something that will need student voice and a process for getting students involved with that, but also having parents in the community involved. So part of the charge for these groups on Tuesdays is also going to be having a roadmap for how they're going to get that voice represented by other groups. Some committees will start off with doing like maybe a parent night and then having a survey or something that they put out as well. Others might do a big forum where they invite parents and see who comes, or invite students, but each group is going to kind of create its own path for how to do that, so that we don't overwhelm parents by having 4 huge community forums, for example, but also so it's more tailored to what the specific work is that committee is doing. Like the Learner Support Improvement Committee, that probably wouldn't be one where a giant parent forum would be helpful, because that topic is overwhelming. Sometimes the language that is used for setting the systems up isn't something that parents want to know about and be involved with. That might be one where a focus group is more helpful, where we ask for volunteers in the community to come in. But something like the Vision of the Graduate or the Culture Committee, where you're potentially looking at changes to our school's identity together, those are much bigger topics that would have much bigger parent and community nights, more surveys, more information, things like that. So these initial committees are much smaller and just focused on getting the process going and doing some of the legwork.
So will it, for a given PLC, will those PLC members be spread across those 4 committees?
Yes, yep, this is different, sort of separate from the PLC process. I guess these will become their own second PLCs, because they're going to do a lot of data looking and analysis and things like that on Tuesdays. But this has to be diverse across the whole school, because if you only, for example, had a 7th and 8th grade PLC groups doing one of these things, they would be missing voice from all the other areas.
That's not what I meant. If you have a 7th, 8th grade PLC group, those members are spread across these committees.
Correct, yes.
So that not only are the committees doing work, but the PLCs
Correct.
are in parallel benefiting from.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Yep. Yep. And again, the nice thing is, and why we're able to do this approach where we're only using Tuesdays and having these smaller groups working on these 4 areas, is because we've already been doing a lot of other things that you'll read in the report. Like there's a section in here about the work, some of the counseling challenges and not having the right staffing levels and things like that. We've already addressed and fixed that. We already had a plan for that even before this process, because we saw some of those changes and we talked about that a couple of ed committee meetings ago. So because, ditto with MTSSB, we've already been doing that. This is just telling us, yeah, you should be doing that, but that's already in process. Or improving the use of data to inform learning, we're already doing that. So the good piece is that there's very few things in here that require something extra or outside of what we were already doing. It's really just these 4 areas. And even these are more like formalizing that stuff into the right format and including the right people. None of this, even in itself, is like outside the realm of what we would think we should be doing.
So you mentioned administrative support. Is that clerical or is that administrators or?
That's the administrators in the building will each be on one of these groups doing basically like when the group comes up with the Vision of the Graduate pieces they want, rather than having a teacher go out and now type it all up, the administrator will do that. Because we have more ability to be flexible and things like that with how we use time to write those things out. We don't want to take away from the classroom time and PLC time and things like that.
So the teachers know that this is coming, another,
Yep, we met on Tuesday of this week and went through it. They already knew anyways because
Yeah.
they were a part of the process last year.
Yeah.
But they know sort of what the plan is for this year. And they're going to be completing a survey tomorrow that ranks these and things like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The challenge is going to be on the teacher side of it. Some teachers get very excited about this, honestly, and they weirdly so, they want to go out and they want to do all of it right now. But I've had to already talk to a couple of folks and say, we're going to do this slowly. We have some time, we're going to focus on using Tuesdays. I don't want this to become this part of the process to become burdensome because the work we're doing already is more important than the documentation here. This we can do just by spending a little bit of time and being diligent, but the other stuff is where their energy should go.
So wait, these are not the goals that you have to do for improvement? Now I'm confused. all of a
These
sudden.
are, but these are like the vision of the graduate.
Yeah.
We already have those components pieces, like all the little chunks. I don't want to spend time going back and redefining the chunks and that, like, we already have that in our strategic design.
Yeah,
So this committee is going to do that work, but it could be done on Tuesdays, a couple Tuesdays a month and be done with it.
uh-huh.
The bigger work is like the collaborative culture with data, which is what we're working on in PLCs.
Yeah.
That's where I want them to spend their time because that's the stuff that has the bigger immediate impact on work.
So the things that you went through that you said were the improvements that need to be made in order to have them met.
Right,
Those are the ones you'll be working on Tuesdays.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's gonna be a longer process in terms of trying to have a unified culture
Right.
across two schools.
Yeah. That's
That's
gonna
gonna
be,
take time.
absolutely. And they know that. And the good thing is that particular one is not a foundational element standard. That's a recommendation based on some areas that we were developing in and how we can move the needle a little bit on school culture. Some of that work is happening just by how we team and reteam people in the building. But some of it, until we engage the community and engage the board and rip the Band-Aid off in some pieces, it's just going to continue to be a challenge. We're starting to have increasing amounts of people saying, why do we have to have CHS/JRMS? Why can't we just figure out, are we Jaffrey Ridge Middle High School? Are we Conant Middle High School? Why are we doing this? That conversation, for example, is becoming more frequent. So until we start to address some of that, which I agree with you is going to be a longer conversation, I think that will always be kind of an artificial barrier, a glass ceiling, I guess, between what the culture can look like and be like.
But at least they're asking a question.
Yeah, it's become increasing numbers of people. It's not everybody, but we get it more and more often. Like, why am I having to say CHS/JRMS? Or middle school learners will sometimes say, why can't we just be Conant too? I'm like, it's okay, we're JRMS, it's great. But they kind of get it that the school is, because it does function so much as one, they kind of get it, So. And I have no opinion whatsoever about what direction that should go right now, but I just know that's a conversation that I'm sure this group is going to want to broach with the community.
Well, the more unified and inclusive the culture is, the more the students are going to benefit
Right.
long term.
Right.
Because there's going to be a sense of a sixth grade teacher that, she's preparing people for the 12th grade.
Right.
So, and they need to, and she'll go out and collaborate with people, finding out what she can do in her end to
Yep.
prepare the students better.
Yep. We're doing some other things to help with that already this year, even outside of this, like, with the middle high school setup, the middle school is teamed really nicely to have great grade level discussions because they're teamed by grade level. So they can look across all the learners they share, and if there's concerns or things that they need to support, they can have those conversations and strategize and make, plans for how they can do intervention with just the time they share. The high school doesn't have that because they're organized by content team. There isn't a 9th grade team, just by the nature of them needing to teach different parts of the same subject. On the flip side, the high school has an advantage with some of the PLC work because they're all working in the same content. So they can look across 4 grade spans and make
Mhm.
decisions about where the benchmark should be, what the data is telling them. The middle school teams don't really have that. So this year, our team leaders came up with a really great strategy, which I love that they discussed and were able to brainstorm. So this goes with C up here for sure. They want to use some Tuesdays, which we've already planned some out throughout the course of the year. Again, instead of having a staff meeting where I stand up there with a clipboard and go through a list of business, which I can just email out, they want to have a couple of Tuesdays.
Can we use the clipboard in there?
No, it's already in the trash.
Oh,
They want to, the high school on those select Tuesdays are going to meet with cohorts of teachers who teach 9th graders, for example. So if I have a group of 9th graders that I'm feeling like I need some support with, I'll meet with other teachers who have that same concern of those same learners, and they can use that to come up with strategies for intervention and remediation. So they'll get that middle school benefit a couple times a month. And then the middle school content teams are going to use that time to do some of that longitudinal content work. So they're already starting to think through how can we use the systems and people we have, so all of us are getting the benefits that each part of the school gets. And that came 100% from them. To me, that was evidence of some of the culture work kind of paying off, but it was also part of the PLC process. They were looking at how their PLCs can do more of that data and collaborative work and come up with strategies to support learners. So that's an example of the longer term pacing that you were kind of talking about too. Sometimes you have to keep laying a foundation and keep working, and people have to keep on building, competence together and to be able to work across grades like that.
But in the, like, what really needs to be done, it has to be completed by, did you say 2023 or 2024?
Realistically,
Like to report it out.
the report starts to get written in the fall of 2023. Which means if, like with Vision of the Graduate, if we don't finish that until the end of the school year, there's virtually no way that we'll meet the standards for some of the other pieces that need that, because we won't have had time to use it.
Mhm.
So for some of these, it's like a 6-month time frame, and then we have to start using them.
There is
which is-
some urgency in it. We
Right.
have to kind of get moving. Okay.
Right. The good thing is that those particular pieces are some of the easier ones to get done.
Mhm.
The culture one, that's not a foundational element that we're missing. So we're working on it and putting a committee together because it's important and it touches so many of the standards that we were at developing on. But as long as we're working on those when they come back and we've moved the needle, we're going to be fine. We wouldn't lose accreditation over that. So the things that that are going to take more time, we have more time to do them in. The foundational elements that we need to get done now, those I think we can get done in that 6-month window pretty easily.
Mhm. Okay. That's good. Great report.
Are there any other questions?
I mean,
You
I
may-
haven't read through it, so I'm not.
Yeah, it's, you may have more after you read through it, and I'm happy
Yeah.
to. Maybe next month, if there's things that come up between now and then as you're reading through it, I'm happy to answer more questions then too. I didn't mention that they were impressed by our parking lot. That was one of the commendations. Some of them I didn't put in there because
Wait, they were or were not?
they were,
Oh.
because it had just been redone, and it's. The comment
Got
that they made about the facility improvement work was that. I don't remember how he phrased it exactly, but the chair would happen to be on that subcommittee, and he said it's rare that you see non-flashy things getting done that have a big impact. So that's why he was blown away by the HVAC work. He said, I don't know how you convinced people that was important, because most schools struggle with that, but here you've got all this stuff already going on, and he was like blown away. And the same thing with the parking lot. He said, I've seen schools, the parking lot's a mess and nobody seems to care, but kids get hurt. He said, your school district clearly has a plan for that and it's showing through. I said, yeah, well, that's good that you're recognizing that, but they literally put that in there about.
Good thing they
specific.
came now, because it wasn't that long ago. And
Yeah.
it was pretty bad. So that's good. That's good. The new sign, all that
Yeah.
fancy stuff.
Yeah,
we've actually had, I've received a couple of emails in the last week about the way the front looks, both with the flowers at the front here and so forth.
Yep.
They're still struggling due to rain issues, but also the sign and so forth, that people feel like it feels like a school as opposed to a building.
One thing that you didn't mention, Dave, was the counseling. The priority area.
Mhm. That's the 4th committee up there, the Learner Support Committee.
Okay,
Some of the counseling things that were under their priority areas dealt with staffing issues that we were having, both with not mostly because of COVID and the impacts there. We didn't have enough even out of the gate, but then we had somebody resign before they had come in last year and take a role in Massachusetts. So that was part of it. Part of it was that we hadn't had the processes in place that we already have this year. Some of it just fixed itself by the nature of the work we were already doing. But the other elements of it are going to be the work of this D committee here. And a lot of that will be met with the MTSSB work. That's going to include a lot of counseling services and refining those processes and things like that. The section on counseling is very pointed, but the counseling team took the feedback really well, and it didn't surprise them because again, they were feeling a lot of that. But I feel like we have a really good strategy moving forward to address this and then also make sure we're supporting learners long term.
Lot to digest.
It is. You'll probably, if you really want to pull everything out of the report, it might take you a few reads. I had to go through it 4 times with just because I kept on going back and missing things and whatever else, but
Well, we knew a lot of the information. All the time, counseling,
Right.
Matter of fact, through the communication committee years ago, we had conversations with
Correct.
parents wanting to have more communication with counseling. That was just one aspect of it.
right.
And so it's why we, through the budget process, changed the structure anyhow. And
Right.
that happened before here, and certainly was, the changes were underway.
Right.
During this time frame.
So Charlie, thank you for pointing these out because I didn't put the priority areas in here directly. That's a lot of what this is up here. But that page 33 is it's basically our SMART goals of the things that we're saying we absolutely will do. And then everything else that's beyond that and recommendations are things we might do or should work on.
Wait,
So-
which ones are what's their smart, where are you looking at?
Page 33. So that's a roundabout way of up here. That's what that's these committees.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
So this report was, this was done in May,
correct.
okay? It's interesting, it says the community and the district's governing body provide adequate and dependable funding to fully implement the curriculum, including programs and other learning opportunities.
Oh, read a little bit further down though, Charlie. Halfway through the paragraph.
Let's see.
Mhm.
School districts has short-term and long-term plans to address the capital and maintenance needs of these buildings.
Are you on page 31?
I'm on page 9,
Oh, go to page 31.
31. All right,
Yes.
let me go down to 31.
Those first few pages are what the standards contain. So there's nothing, those are like boilerplates.
Okay,
But when you look at standard 5 learning resources and you go down to the bottom paragraph, that kind of talks about the budget situation for this current school year. And they looked at the historical budgets and talked about the funding that was implemented and things like that, but then got to the place of this year's budget and the impact.
Okay.
And it wasn't a negative comment that
No.
that was just a factual paragraph, but
right.
um,
Right, this one helps the priority areas. Those are the 4 priorities that you're going to start working on right away.
correct.
And then the other ones are just kind of. Wait, these are just. Oh, recommendations. The recommendations are the ones that if you get there, you can get there, but it's not
Correct.
like imperative.
Exactly. Those are things that we were in the
Mhm.
developing or implementing phase of on the
Mhm.
sliding scale that we, just as good practice as part of our school improvement plan, we built those into it.
Okay.
Mhm.
So that was their take on
Yep,
that situation, but
it's factual.
and it is what it is. And, you know,
It is,
at the end of the day, it's thanks for the information and we're gonna keep looking
And
forward,
good luck finding 900,000.
which we did. Well, you did. And the finance committee did, but
All right, so there are no more questions on this? I know you are full of questions, Daisy. Just slow it down. Okay?
Feel free to email me, or like I said, I'll be at the next ed committee meeting, so I'm happy to answer if there's stuff that comes up as you're doing the deeper read, like what Charlie just asked. I'm happy to answer any of those.
Okay.
I spared those from our presentation because it does get very nitty gritty.
Yeah. It's hard to condense 41 pages in.
Right.
Yeah.
What were there, 5 slides, 4 slides,
11 tonight,
11?
but one of them was the title, so.
Still takes up time.
Yeah.
Okay, you ready to talk?
I'm ready. Let's
Go
talk.
for it.
We are discussing policy JFAB again. Do we want to change tuition for out of district students? No fancy slides, guys.
So we're kind of looking at what are the consequences for inviting more people and them going for cheaper tuition for all for attending this school. So
consequences, for instance, in the conversations we had, could be behavioral consequences, cultural consequences. We've talked about with Heather, stating that when we have individuals who are on soccer teams who go to other schools and so forth, that has an impact, and so translate that over to a school day. People from other communities coming in, being part of your community, what is there consequence to that? What are some possible constraints that we might have? Space constraints? Are there specific things that we'd have to consider if we were to move forward with doing any, putting a rate that was maybe more affordable, so that families could access this district a little bit easier? Would there be specific things that we'd want to consider when developing a rate? Within this school setting, because obviously the secondary school operates differently than the elementary level.
and then I know Ruben, we also talked about access to the voucher, the homeschool out of district voucher that people get. Does that go with that? It's like 4,600, I think.
So David probably wouldn't have, any opinions on that piece, because there's a process for that individuals, if we were to move forward with
Okay.
a tuition, how that voucher would play, because not
Okay.
everyone even would have access to that.
Okay.
There's a scale as
Oh,
to who
okay.
could even, well, anyone can apply, I suppose, but who would be able to be eligible? for
Oh, all right.
that.
It's not just
They go
like,
to the website, they would know whether they're eligible or not, because there's a scale
Mhm.
similar to the free and reduced lunch scale that we ask people to sign up for.
Got it. Okay.
So the policy committee asks for some feedback from the education committee and the finance committee. The finance committee is right now looking at what kind of numbers we need to crunch and what kind of direction we should go relative to if we do have out of district tuition. Should we cost incremental cost based, or should it be some other based?
Ruben,
What are the factors? So from a financial point of view, finance committee is looking at it. From the educational committee's perspective, we're expected to look at the other aspects of it, the non-financial, and we can provide input on financial as well. What is, when we have people coming from out of district, what are the risks that we take? What are the things that we have to be aware of?
So are you talking in this sort of a scenario about somebody coming full-time to the school here? So this wouldn't be like somebody coming just for part of the day and then going, like, if they're from an adnoc. They
No,
would just
the
be
intent would
fully
be for
enrolling
them
here.
to be a full-time resident student.
Mhm,
They may come in during the year,
mhm.
but when they do come in, they're looking at full-time.
what is the tuition right now to come in here?
The tuition right now that we have had for, probably forever, that is the average, the previous year's average rate. So we are typically a little shy of the average rate in the state of New Hampshire. We've been around 15.5. I think last year was a little more expensive as we had a decline in enrollment and so forth, so it may have been up to close to 16 to 17,000. But
Okay,
we
so
both,
ish.
but whatever
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
has been,
Mhm.
that's what we've used for communication. When people
Okay.
ask that question.
All right, and so when we're looking at the, I'm just trying to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this properly, is if we raise it, lower it, or keep it the same? And we're looking at pros and cons of these?
There are some individual districts or schools that have decided to create a rate that is perhaps more accessible for families if they want to have more of a choice as to where to send
Okay,
their learners. And so, for instance, there's some nearby schools or districts that have made it, say, 7,000 or 6,500, and they've had some sort of formula that they've developed internally. It's usually, for instance, one of the schools is a small elementary school. They do it for about 6,500. Their per pupil cost is close to like 26,000. And so the reason why they do that is because they can bring in more individuals to their school. They believe they have a good product that other people want. And it helps them have, because they have such a small population, it helps their kids there have a more well-rounded education because of other people coming in. So it benefits them that way. And it also lowers their per pupil costs as well. When they
Oh,
come to-
okay.
Yeah.
so
And-
that's is that what the finance committee is looking at, is the deficit of, like, if a kid comes in for like and pays 6,000 tuition, but it cost the district 23,000 to keep them here. Is that what the finance committee is looking at?
No, the finance committee is looking at, right now, we're looking at zero cost increase. So in other words, what we do is, the incremental cost of a out of district student attending a fifth grade class
Mm-hmm,
would depend on, do we have openings in the fifth grade?
mm-hmm,
Can we provide that without hiring a teacher?
right,
Okay, so we're not stepwise increasing our cost.
yeah,
So then we can say, okay, the incremental cost would be transportation, books, uniforms for sports, those kind of things.
Technology, like everyone gets a Chromebook, for instance. that sort
Everybody
of
gets a
thing.
Chromebook.
yeah,
Determine what that cost would be, and that would be the incremental tuition cost.
okay,
So the taxpayers are saying, well, gee, they're getting cheaper than our people are. What we're saying is, no, they're not getting it cheaper. Okay, because you're gonna pay that whether they attend or not.
yeah,
And if they do attend, it's not gonna cost you anything because they're paying the incremental
their
cost.
piece, okay,
So
But
they're
the
actually
idea
bringing
behind it,
revenue to the district, which
Mm.
benefits
right,
the whole.
they're actually bringing in revenue, is that what you just said?
They would be, if we're not spending extra
Yeah,
for them to come on in, and
Uh-huh.
let's say you had across the district. Let's make the numbers round. Let's say
Yeah.
it's $10,000 per individual. You have 30 kids, you have $300,000 that has come in, and if you haven't had to spend any more money as a result, that's 300,000 either that you can utilize for the betterment of everyone, or that's 300,000 that might go back to help reduce taxes
mhm,
later on, that sort of thing. So it can actually benefit the community as a whole either way, or both ways.
How many kids do we have tuitioning in now?
We have a couple, maybe, less than a handful of individuals who are tuitioned here, but it's not tuitioned by parental choice. It's tuitioned
It's like-
usually due to other schools needing to do so.
So is it kind of shared? Is that what you're talking about, becoming shared?
Not necessarily shared.
I mean, the
Let's say at another district, someone has needed to move because of either a best interest or a manifest hardship. That's really the issue, the manifest hardship. And so they would ask us, could we send this child here, or the circumstances?
Yeah.
This is what they're looking for. We tend to have a better rate than a lot of the places around us.
Okay.
Because we're pretty fiscally
But-
responsible, I think, in how we do business, and I think every other schools are as well, but we aren't as well. We aren't spread out as much, and so it's a little bit easier to be fiscally responsible. than some
Okay.
other
But
places.
I think one of the things that I'd be looking for the education committee to provide is, what is our strategy? What is a long-term strategy, given that the state seems to be going to more choice opportunities for parents? And do we want to be a magnet school? Do we want to be one of the schools that's, parents choose? And so there's a cost aspect to that, but also there's an aspect of it from the educational perspective. In other words, what do we need to do to attract students? Right now, students either come here or they homeschool or they go to, private school. And what do we need to do to attract students from other districts? If that's what we want to do, what does our curriculum look like? What do our electives look like? What are the things that we would need to change? And is there a cost associated with doing that? And so from a strategic direction, I think the Ed Committee has much more to say than the Finance Committee, because all we're doing is looking at,
But also,
cost and revenue.
is it even a good idea? What's the potential harm to culture and climate should we allow individuals that, you can think of it that way as well.
Okay, so that's where the
I think
pros
you
and
have to ask the
cons come
question.
from.
Yeah.
Okay, so seeing the pros and cons in, like, even just blocking out the money for a minute, but pros and cons of, do we want kids coming in here? What is the good and the bad in having outside kids come in because they want to be here? Okay, I'm understanding more. Sorry for the questions, but I
No,
was kind of
no,
like,
that's good,
why we're-
ah.
Because we're not going to solve it tonight.
Yeah, yep.
We're-
I just need information because I was kind of like,
This is a lot for me right now.
oh,
but-
policy.
Yeah.
That's how I was feeling. That's why I'm asking questions. You should be thankful I'm asking these.
When Charlie put that into the email tonight, I was like, I know what this means, but I don't know what it means.
Me too. Don't worry.
I think one of the things that you just said, Kim, at the end, I think is important. The difference between somebody who wants to join us by choice and they're saying, this is where I want to go, this, I'm excited to be here, I'll pay the money, versus somebody who is coming in from the community but doesn't want to be here. In some situations, if you have somebody who doesn't attend a lot of classes here, or they live in district and come in for one class, that can be really hard because that individual doesn't always have the same care for the school community. They clearly don't want to take their classes here for whatever reason.
Mhm.
So that person might come in and have a different view on the school or a different, input into the community than what you might expect or hope for. But somebody who's paying money and saying, this is where I want to be, I'm excited about the opportunities it can bring. We have a few of those individuals in the building now who have chosen to come here, and they do contribute very positively to the school community because they want to be here. That they're making a conscious choice that this environment is better for them. And on the flip side, they've done better here often than they've done from the district that they were in before.
Mhm.
Again, because they're making the conscious choice that this is the better fit. So I think that's important. What you said is really important with that. I think that they have to want to be here.
Yeah,
if
for
they're gonna
sure.
Choose us to, or else it does.
Because you
worry.
do want them to be like part of the community. You want them
Right.
to be a positive part,
Right,
which is hard. So I guess that would kind of tie into making sure that we have that we do have a bit of some kind of tuition so that it's not just like, yeah, I'm gonna go. We could do that. Because then it's not going to be what we're looking for.
right.
Right.
And I think what's been helpful in some of the other cases where we've had people coming here is that there's a clear sense coming into it that there are criteria for your success in the school, like a success criteria for people who are choosing to be here. And part of that is that you're coming for, because you want to be in the school, you'll attend, you're going to not contribute sort of behavioral things. Like there are criteria in the current policies that those individuals are on that I think are also helpful to have dialogue with those families before they even come in. We're looking at this as an opportunity, but here are some things that are going to be really important for joining our community. We want, these are the norms we expect, things like that. So I think that's something to consider too, is what, if that's possible, what criteria might be included in a policy like that, not to screen out types of individuals, but to make sure that our community values and expectations are being met by people that are coming in. In terms of the space question, speaking just for the middle high school, I mean, it's tighter now that we have made some cuts within the past year. But with the schedule adjustment and with some of the declining numbers over years, I think we're comfortable in most of our grade levels right now. There's some tightness with some UAs still based on just how the schedule works and things like that. But, you know, there's a lot, like our biggest class is 115 last year. I think it's 109 this year or something. That's still very doable for us. Most of our grade levels are below that. Most of them are in the 90s, maybe high 80s. So I don't know if you could look at the total population of the school and look at historically where we've been with that current staffing levels and say that that's like the cap, like we would take up to this amount. And that might be a way to make sure that we don't exceed, you know, where we would then have to be hiring people or things like that.
Because we've
Because once
talked about,
Sorry.
we've talked about some things like, it's a 1-year deal. right? So if we have class space, you can be there this year, but let's say that the following year, we don't have a space. We would have to be able to say no to the tuition. no
Right.
to the-
And
So those are some things we need to consider.
You could, looking, you know, we relatively, generally speaking, we know, okay, the current 5th grade class has this many individuals. So we know that when they come to 6th grade, we often pick up some learners coming into 6th grade and lose a few others, but that's pretty stable. You know, if there's 87 5th graders, then we will have somewhere between 85 and 90 6th graders. So you can kind of predict even and say, unless all of a sudden tons of people move in and we've got tons of people registering, you kind of can have a sense even over the longer term of saying, you know what, this year we're going to be totally fine taking this number of learners because we know next year, you know, this is what we have happening. And I feel like with the data that we do have access to, you can
Well,
make some
if we look at
predictions.
projections, we can then project.
Right.
Okay, if we have this family coming in and they, even though we have a year-by-year contract and they can leave and so forth. You typically want to provide those individuals the opportunity to be part of that community and stay through. So having some sort of formula to allow for that to take place without taking on too many people, that's going to make that difficult to happen.
So when we're looking at this as the with policy and stuff, we can put a lot of like stipulations and we can kind of craft and write this.
Mhm.
Okay.
Based on our input. we get from the education committee.
Okay.
I do like your idea too, Charlie. And I think it's kind of what we've been talking about and making moves on for years. And I don't know what the answer is in terms of what type of magnet we would become. But as we've continued to do work on building pathways, having partnerships with both Conval and Keene and community colleges and building out some of those work opportunities, growing our STEM and STEAM offerings, as we've done more of that work, I think that becomes its own type of magnet, because we're not just saying traditional 6 through 12 curriculum and stick with it and be done with it.
Mhm.
Already we have learners going all over the place and doing all sorts of different things that enrich them and make them feel good about their pathway. Part of me feels like if this conversation of trying to attract people here only makes that work more important. You know, if we become a place where you have a connection with, and you can go to the Conval CTE and take all these great career courses, or we'll send you to Keene for things you don't have there. Or we have a partnership with this community college and you know, we can send people there with no cost, or we have this great, you know, apprenticeships that the more we do that and we have opportunities and we're like a hub for that, I think that draws people in too, because for that individual who doesn't want to go and take English 9, English 10, English 11, and that's it, they can see us as a place where they can come and find a path and we're going to support them getting there.
Mhm.
I think that's a big selling point for families because
Yeah,
the
for
needs of kids are different every single year.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's important.
Makes it
With or
appealing.
without. out of this.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I
So
just,
if we're working on that, it's gonna be an automatic.
right. I just think it makes the work that we're already doing all the more important because it's what families and kids need.
Mm-hmm. For sure. That's good. That's a lot of information there. My brain's on overload. It's good.
So is mine, but it's got nothing to do with this.
Wait, no, I have one more question. This isn't a hard one though. Oh, with a student coming onto school board, school started, what is the plan with trying to figure that out? What are we gonna do?
So we have to hold elections for the individual, and in the past, prior to COVID, when we had that person, the principal just picked somebody and then sent them.
To come here?
they actually go to the school board.
Oh, right.
We haven't done that in the COVID years,
Okay.
but the law changed and it's good. It's what we were planning on doing when the position came back anyway.
Mhm.
But we're going to be having elections, not next week, but the week after. I can't remember the time. That might be next Friday. Tomorrow, there's a flyer going out to the learners with a form and it's open to juniors and seniors. They can basically sign up to be a candidate. They'll go and have a chance to give speeches to the student body and then there'll be an election.
So-
And whoever's elected will then go to the board as the student's representative.
Okay, so it will become its own thing. You're not
Right.
talking like an election for the president and then the president's gonna come here or a part of that.
Yep.
It's gonna be their own
Yep.
entity. Okay. All right, and then that will happen and then they'll.
So
start
I would
coming.
expect that individual, not obviously, is there a board meeting Monday?
The 19th.
Oh,
So
right.
maybe they'd go to, that might be a quick turnaround. So if they're not at the 19th, they'd be at the next one. And be consistent. And once we have this process underway, we would do this election in the springtime for the following year. So that person is ready to start, in September or August. So,
Oh, so we don't have one on the 12th?
No, we had the typical one that it would have usually been on that Monday that we have the Labor Day. So we decided rather than to have the 12th and the 19th, we had it, I think it was the 31st or. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or the
I
29th or
vaguely
something like
remember
that. yeah.
that.
One of those, August, it was in August, whatever that Monday was.
Okay, so the 12th has become the
I think it was the
19th.
31st.
Okay,
Well, the 19th is regular scheduled.
Is the regularly scheduled one, yeah. Because
Oh.
it's the first.
Usually first and third Wednesday, we do holidays, because, it's a holiday. Usually up or down, depending on kind of where it falls in the schedule. But if we have a fifth Monday, it's usually pretty easy to just tuck it up ahead.
okay. Looks like my school board meetings are all off now all of a sudden. Okay. So, okay, so go off of the 19th and do every 2 weeks?
It's first and third Monday, which might be why you're off. It's
Oh,
not
that's
every 2 weeks, it's
exactly
first
why
and
I'm
third
off.
Monday.
I'm sorry, yeah, okay,
There's a schedule posted in the calendar.
I remember seeing it.
Yeah, just
And
go to the website.
yeah.
And there's school board calendars, it's got school board meetings. so.
Yeah,
And those are also posted in the live
Oh, the live calendar.
calendar as well.
Yeah.
You can subscribe to it. That
okay. All right. Anybody else
you.
have any more questions? Nothing? Thank you.
welcome.